Hi, everyone. My name is Jesse Robbins, and welcome to LPLE from Dialogue FM. We're the podcast that lets you practice listening in English. We speak English slowly and clearly so that you can follow along and understand native English speakers more easily. I'm excited to help you improve your English listening skill, as well as help you learn new vocabulary, grammar, and idioms commonly heard in conversations among native English speakers. If you want to practice listening in English, then we invite you to join our conversation. Hey, Andrew.
Hey, Jesse.
Some interesting trends have emerged as it relates to online dating. Now, a few episodes ago, we talked about online dating, right?
Right, yeah, and how it's kind of changed the way people meet.
Right. And we talked about it at a very general perspective.
Right.
What are the apps, right? Why are they useful? And how has it changed our ability to interact with other people?
Right, and I'm sure it was very interesting considering neither of us have actually ever used them.
Right. However, we do have a mutual friend who does.
Yes.
So we get to live vicariously through his experiences.
Right, we get to kind of imagine what it's like by hearing his stories played back.
Right. Vicarious is an interesting word. When we think of the word vicarious, usually what that means is we are enjoying the experience of doing something through other people's actual experience.
Right. You're not actually doing the thing, but you take pleasure from hearing about or watching someone else do the thing.
Correct. So when we say we are living vicariously through someone's experiences, what we're saying is exactly that. We're enjoying the experience without actually having to do it ourselves.
It's a great way to try things out.
Especially if you're in a committed relationship like you and I are, we can live vicariously through our friend who is doing the online dating. However, as we hear about online dating, it sounds less and less appealing to some extent.
I think the rules are different, yes, and it has some frustrating elements, in part because it is so easy that people spend a bit less time doing the work of getting to know one another. At least that is my perspective.
Right. Well, when you talk about some of these challenges and frustrations, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was some data that's been released over the past couple of years. As I understand it, a popular online dating service might have been Match.com or OkCupid.
I think it was OkCupid that shared their information, yeah.
Had released some really interesting and also controversial data as it relates to race and preferences.
Right.
In general, it seems as though white men prefer Asian women, right?
Yeah.
And vice versa. Asian women typically seem to seek out Caucasian white men.
I think that's true, yes.
And women of other ethnicities, African American or Latina, seem to rank much lower.
In terms of white male preference?
Correct, in terms of white male preference.
Okay. Yeah, I think that.
Oh, actually, in terms of general male preference, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't remember all of the details. I do remember reading about this and seeing a chart where it showed preferences going both ways. So you could see whether or not the majority of white men preferred white women, Asian women, black women, so on and so forth. And this is all for heterosexual relationships.
Correct, yes.
There's other data out there. There are other dating sites, but this data was about men seeking women and women seeking men. But I think the overall picture, if I'm remembering right, is that in general, Asian women are preferred across a broad selection of men,
Correct.
and white men are preferred across a broad selection of women. I think
Yes.
is the summary of that information.
Correct.
There are a couple other things that are troubling too with that, but it is there was a very common preference in that direction.
Right. Now, it's interesting you use the word troubling, right?
Yeah.
Because pure data in and of itself just shows a trend.
Right.
We're seeing general preferences.
This is just what is happening on the dating site. They're not trying to tell a story or send a message or say what people should do. They're just saying what they have seen people do on their own without any sort of specific pressure.
Right. Now, I'm curious as to why you use the word troubling.
I think that if we are hoping for an equal society where race is not a concern, it's neither an advantage nor a disadvantage for a person to be white or black or brown or mixed, then for that world to exist, we need to believe, or it needs to be true, that people don't have specific preferences for one race over another. And this data seems to be showing that, at least right now, there is bias for both men and women in terms of who they prefer to date. And that bias, preferring one race over another, gets in the way of us treating each other as equals. What I would hope to find is that white men prefer all women equally, regardless of their race, and the same for women of any type. They prefer and date men of any race. That would be the sort of completely fair and ideal outcome, right? In a race-blind world where people don't see or care about your race. And the data is just showing that that is not true, that it is kind of an unfair playing ground when it comes to dating.
Now, the analysis between preferences, how I interpret that as it relates to how it makes me feel that this is a problem and it's a troubling situation, is dating represents an emotion, the idea of wanting to find somebody to spend your time with, to love, and to have as your companion. This is a core root of who we are and what our needs are.
Mm-hmm.
So when I see this data, I think for me, it tells me more about how our society views race in general. I think it's fair to say that we could take this, if dating is a core representation of our basic needs and basic preferences,
desires, right?
Then to me, then this carries over into many other aspects of our life. Social friendships, professional relationships, and how we hire people, how we promote people.
Right.
When we demonstrate that there's a bias at the core affinity level, like who we like, who we prefer to spend our time with, I think that is also a signal in other areas as well.
I think that's probably true. I think there are different complications in different places, right? Dating and dating preferences may be slightly different from, say, who you'd prefer to play sports with on a team or who you would prefer to work with on a team. And it is only because we were able to get at this kind of interesting data from dating that we're able to see this play out. Because you can't go to someone on the street and interview them and say, so which races do you like? Because that is not a fair question, and it also requires people to be honest in a way that it is hard for people to know about themselves, because what they think and what they do could be different. The dating data is really interesting because it is just keeping track of what happened already. There's no interview, there's no direct question, and so we get to see what people are actually doing, what their actual behavior is showing. And I think that might be the first time we've had that kind of information available.
It's really shocking information. It's really helpful information.
Mm-hmm.
It is, in English, we say it's a pulse, right? When we talk about the pulse of our society.
It lets us measure the pulse of our society, to check on the heartbeat, whether or not our society is behaving in the way we would like it to.
Correct.
Or heading in the direction that we would like it to.
Correct. So if a pulse is irregular, then we talk about that's a troubling issue. The pulse is your heartbeat, right? Mm-hmm. So if your heartbeat is irregular, then something is wrong.
Right.
So when we talk about measuring the pulse of something, it's basically a way for us to check whether something is going well or if something is troubling or concerning or something we should be looking at more in depth.
Right.
So that's just the racial aspect of online dating.
Mm-hmm. And there are plenty more.
Right. So I am a brown looking person. I don't think I would fare well in the online dating scene if the data is correct.
Well, let's be fair too. And this is me speaking as a white male, so I probably have no place to have an opinion. But I think what they are saying is that in aggregate, in all of the people who are on this dating site, there is a better chance if you are a white male. But that does not mean that people like every white male. And by that same logic, it doesn't mean that they dislike all brown men, black men, Latinos. So I think we shouldn't look at this information as a reason to give up hope or to be pessimistic about our chances if we are not the preferred object of someone's affection, because this is only showing broadly what happens, and you're still meeting individual people on the other end of this program, and hopefully your personality and theirs will shine through far beyond the statistics.
I talk about these things knowing that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. I'm in a very happy marriage. I love my wife. She's fantastic. So I really don't have to worry about this online dating scene, and neither do you. I mean, you're in a very fantastic relationship of your own. So
definitely, yes.
I think again, we're speaking anecdotally. We're speaking hypothetically about how we would fare, how we would not perform. What's another word for fare?
I think it's more about how we would react to this information about the dating world, and also how successful we think we could be if we were trying to use these programs to date.
Exactly. Now, another aspect as it relates to online dating is the change in our society. More specifically, as I was walking about town today, I realized one particular thing. So let me paint you a picture of today. Again, we're speaking in stories and we're talking about hypothetical situations. I'm in my car and I'm at a stoplight, and a very, very attractive white woman crosses the street right in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
Very beautiful woman. Me personally, I would never ever have the courage to talk to her if I were a single male. I wouldn't. For two reasons. One, I think in our current social situation, I get the opinion that women in general are more sensitive and more on guard as it relates to men, especially men that they don't know, trying to talk to them randomly on the street.
I think that's fair. Yeah, it is not always a safe situation when you are on your own as a woman in public and have strangers trying to interact with you.
Now, similarly, I think with the emergence of online dating, with the increase of online dating, with the popularity of online dating, generally speaking, the younger generation is not familiar with striking up a conversation or having somebody strike a conversation with them.
You mean they're harder to approach and they're less comfortable making an approach to someone they don't know?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
I would believe that, yeah.
So for two reasons, I feel like this is a very beautiful woman who has just crossed the street, and if I were a single male, I would feel like in our society, it would be much more difficult for me to have a successful attempt at having a conversation with her.
I think depending on the circumstance, well, the example you give, yes, it is too spontaneous and too risky for her to have any interest in that type of encounter. I think that in other situations, it's still possible to meet people that you interact with, either through group activities or through dinners and parties and other places where it's a bit more safe to interact. But I think you're right that no matter what, the part of interacting that requires people to take the first step and approach someone they don't know is happening less and less often, because with the modern dating world, you get to pick your dates on the computer or on the phone long before you have to interact with them. And that is becoming more and more the normal way of learning the first things that you know about another person. You want, I think, I'm guessing because I haven't had to use these services, but I would assume that people are getting used to and like the ability to learn some things about a person before they choose to meet with them, and use the technology to vet them, to make sure that they are going to be a good fit or an interesting person.
It sure as heck makes the start of a conversation that much easier.
Right.
So let's take back the example I was just talking about, which is, let's say now, instead of me being in my car, we are waiting at a bus stop together.
Mm-hmm.
It's far more difficult for me to say, "Hi, my name is Jesse. Nice to meet you," and then start to ask questions to learn about their interest. It seems like it's much more difficult now, or at least much more uncomfortable and uncommon now to have those kinds of conversations, because we don't have those conversations anymore. My guess is back in the day, if we're at a bar or at a bus stop, it might be easier to say, "Oh, hey, I see you here every day, and yeah, I figured I'd introduce myself, and nice to meet you, and where do you work?" and start to learn about each other that way.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I think it's still possible, but I think you're right that some of our habits have changed. So the things that we tend to do when we are alone and waiting are look at our phone or read a book, keep our head down, and a lot of those behaviors make it harder to approach and interact with people. People often wear headphones or do other things to kind of isolate themselves from the people around them.
They're trying to give a signal, "Please don't talk to me."
That is the message in total. Yes. Although I think that it's probably true that some people do that without thinking about it or without intentionally being hard to reach. It is just what you do. You're waiting for the bus, you listen to music, you're on your phone. You're not really engaging with the world in some of the ways that you might have had to back when the furthest away you could get from someone was a book you were reading, right? So it's a mixed bag. There are pluses and minuses to this new dating environment. I think if you had to ask people, though, so many of them are meeting now on these services. It is working. It's helping people find meaningful relationships and long-term partnerships. And so all in, it's still a good thing, I think.
Overall, people are enjoying the new social habit of online dating. It's easy, it's cheap, and the risks of denial are much lower.
Right.
Because you can learn about somebody and create your response to them based off of that initial information. Let me just say, personally speaking, and this is not a look, if you're online dating, more power to you. Best of luck. I understand the good parts, I understand the challenges you face, but personally for me, knowing myself, knowing what my insecurities are, let me just say, I'm very happy I don't have to do online dating.
I feel the same way.
Thank you for listening to this episode of LPLE. Let's practice listening in English from Dialogue FM. Subscribe to LPLE on iTunes to hear the latest episodes, or listen to past episodes on our website, dialogue.fm. That's dialog.fm. If you have questions or comments about English, or if you would like for us to use a word, grammar, or idiom in our conversation so you can learn how to use it correctly, we would love to hear from you on Twitter at dialogue.fm or Facebook at facebook.com/dialoguefm.